a matter of interest, how many farmers are in the room? Can you put your hand up? Just because, just to go off topic a little bit, but the poll that we had just a minute ago, wasn't it fascinating how the biggest barrier to change and adoption is actually the farmers themselves? I think that's indicative perhaps of a very traditional view of extension, one that I think is, that really needs to change and is very much evolving at the moment. I'm off, great, thank you. I wanted to start off with a quick story about as I said, I'm from Frankston. My first job, career job, was as an irrigation extension officer with the State Department of Agriculture in northwest Victoria. And I was trying to convince farmers to go from flood or furrow irrigation to drip irrigation with their fruit trees, because the government wanted to reduce drainage, they were concerned about salinity. Well, it was very expensive to adopt drip irrigation, but once we started talking to farmers and we said, well, actually, if you use drip irrigation, all of a sudden, for 6 months of the year, you don't have to spend all of your time not just producing your crop, packing your crop, marketing your crop, taking your crop to market, etc. And you also need to walk around your farm with a shovel on your back at 3 o'clock in the morning every night. Drip irrigation is going to save you a lot of time that you can then spend on your business. All of a sudden, adoption of this quite expensive practice became much more palatable, and adoption occurred very quickly. So I suppose the key lesson there is that you really need to understand what drives people to make decisions and to make changes. And I think that's very topical given the result of that poll. This is a very old slide, I think was possibly used by BCG members 25 years ago when we first started, about the ingredients for a farming systems group. Birchip Cropping Group was started 25 years ago by a group of local farmers wanting localised research in their area. We work in grains and livestock. So the key ingredients, I suppose, for a good farming systems group is you need farmers who are actually profitable, they have the capacity to be innovative and forward-thinking, but extension isn't or shouldn't be a top-down approach. It also requires farmers who are open to ideas, but researchers who are open to feedback from farmers and that can help tailor their research to have the greatest impact. But also at BCG, we recognised early on the importance of having industry and agribusiness involved in that circle. And I think the key point there is that as part of those relationships with agribusiness, that there is a common aim. And part of the common aim for the entire industry in agriculture should be for profitable farmers, because we're the ones who make the commodity and everyone wants to take a slice of that pie, so the bigger the pie that the farmers produce, the better off for the whole industry. And I suppose underlying farming systems groups, underlying farmers, is the context of the community, that farming and agricultural communities are very closely entwined, and that's been a very important part of BCG's history as well. Obviously, the recipe has changed somewhat in the last 25 years. We've certainly seen in the grains industry, we've seen a massive change towards no-till and conservation farming practices, but as we all know, there's been the pull-out from state government, etc. I think the requirements related to governance have really changed as well. BCG, like most groups, we started off with a heap of volunteers doing a lot of work in paddock, and now 25 years later we've got 20 staff, and as chairman in the last 5 years, what I've really concentrated on is improving our processes, improving our systems, making sure that rather than doing all the stuff that feels good, that our young and vigorous staff really want to do, we get projects, we do what we say we're going to do, we monitor it, we evaluate it, we make sure that we deal professionally and appropriately with all of our stakeholders. And I suppose one of the drivers for that has obviously been that funding opportunities have really tightened. We get a lot of funding from the Grains Research and Development Corporation. They're getting a lot more, there's a lot more competition for funds, not only from RDCs but from government generally. And we really have seen the rise of private agronomists, fee-for-service agronomists. When I got married in 2000 and joined a grain farming organisation, very few people had a private agronomist. Now more than half of grain growers do. And to be honest, when that sort of change started happening in the industry, although we'd always worked with private consultants at BCG, we started feeling a little bit threatened by that, particularly when they started applying for funds from RDCs for projects, and to be honest, pipped us at the post a couple of times. We started thinking, well, we're not so keen about this rise of the private agronomist. But very quickly we learnt that whilst we've collaborated with all members of industry, private agronomists are just another aspect of the industry that we really need to collaborate with as much as we possibly can. We've probably had to change a little bit and reflect where we really sit on the value change in terms of information flow to farmers. We now obviously directly talk to farmers all the time and provide a lot of information, do research trials on farming properties, but at the same time we recognise that private fee-for-service agronomists are also a key target audience. We see a lot of them coming to our field days, often representing their farmer clients. We run specific field days targeted at private fee-for-service agronomists because we recognise that if these people are talking to farmers about paddock-by-paddock decisions, and we are often talking to farmers about bigger picture, broader issues, we're not advising them at the paddock-to-paddock level, but it's better off for the industry if we all have very much high-quality information to present to farmers. Because the other thing that's changing, I suppose, is that farming's becoming a little bit more complicated. The information that we're presenting is really going to be in the future. It's going to come from a sensor. It's going to come from some sort of automated machine that's driving around the paddock. Farmers are now accessing information from Google, from social media. I think unlike Ruth's 4%, I think, of farmers are on Twitter. I think grain farmers are very big on Twitter, and it's become a really great way of learning. And so for providers of information like Farming Systems Group, it's not just the information we provide, it's the context that we provide it in. Because in this 5-step process, data information collection is one thing, but the knowledge, the insight, the wisdom, that really comes through peer-to-peer conversations, providing people with the opportunity to learn from other farmers, providing access to researchers, providing access to industry, just like BCG has done in the past. Part of the challenge will be to be more innovative and attract people from outside agriculture, people who are experts in terms of connectivity, people who are experts, often in the private industry, related to data input and data collection. I suppose, and I should mention, one of the things that BCG's really tried to do that is involve not just the local, I suppose the usual suspects in agriculture, but very much people from outside agriculture. We've been involved in social research with the SAI platform, universities, and particularly now with more and more philanthropic organisations who have a real interest in getting involved in agriculture and sustainability. But I think one of the key drivers for the future of extension is that E shouldn't just be dropped off the end and as an afterthought. We are still finding so many projects that come out that are research-based projects that have a tiny little extension at the end, and extension should be upfront and part of every discussion and consideration in terms of RD&E projects. And I'll just finish with, I suppose many of you would have heard of the philosophical thought experiment. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, I wonder, if a research question is answered and no one adopts it, is it still valid?